I did want to incorporate a topic that, the Toasties kind of encouraged me to talk about. It's 2019 in film.
Right.
And there was one particular story that had come out this week, how Blade Runner.
Yeah.
That movie is set in 2019.
Sure.
And, having seen that film and having lived the lives that we're living right now, a lot of that stuff never came to fruition. There's no.
Do you not have your replicant yet?
I don't have my sex replicant. I don't have anything like that. I don't have a flying car, which, by the way, if there was flying cars around, the death toll would be extent. That's true. I would know. I would be dead by now. The amount of wrecks that I've been in and the nonsense that's happened with that. But it is the fact that apparently 2019 is a very popular year in film and in science fiction movies.
That is weird.
Yeah, all of a sudden. I mean, you have...
I guess, 2020 just seemed too pat because it's 20 and 20.
Sure. It's a little too futuristic.
It's almost kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
But if you knock it down to 2019, it sounds more plausible.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it kind of made me start to think, it's like, okay, look, like 2019, the last few years, particularly when it comes to just, our politics and, the tensions just within our, our society and country and also around the world, it's bad, but at least we can appreciate certain elements, of it, and where, unlike these societies where you just can't.
Sure.
Because that's the thing, like even with like something like Blade Runner, which is one of the movies I just kind of wanted to talk about, is how this is a pretty miserable and awful society to live in. The fact that it's a dystopian society, and that is completely ruled by corporations. It's funny how a lot of these movies, yes, they have these exaggerated elements to them, like robots and flying cars and things. But they do have just like a lot of important aspects that are like from our own society and how they just become so exaggerated. Sure. And that's just something I just wanted to talk about because, again, with this year, kind of comparing our own time with these movies and seeing if there'd be anything like potentially like in the future. That like kind of like expanding upon like, okay, how can something from our timeline eventually lead to something like from Blade Runner? And I mean, one of the things is that, and kind of just for Blade Runner specifically, is the idea of kind of corporations just taking control of the society and like using and also kind of going back into stuff that like happened centuries ago, the idea of slave labor. Like those are kind of the things that to me are kind of frightening, where it's like we could potentially go back, regress in that way, even though we're going forward in terms of like our technology and, certain other cultural aspects. Well,
I mean, America has been built on slave labor. Always somebody as if not slave labor, then cheap labor.
Yeah.
And if robots could be created to do that, I mean, you already got machines taking over, doing a lot more work. But if you could do full-on robots, those would get pumped out easily.
Yeah, the ideas that are introduced, the fact that it is so relevant today, it just makes it, even though I'm not a big fan of it, just a classic. And how those elements still hold up about it. The fact that they made that sequel, which I even liked even better than the original film, and how they kind of again expounded on those ideas and showing that like society still hasn't improved despite everything. But yeah, that was just one particular film that came off the head that takes place in 2019. Now there are others I wanted to touch on. One that I thought was kind of relevant again, which was you're probably a big fan of this movie, Martin. You like the animes, right?
Not the
animes?
Not most of them.
Not most of them?
I don't hate them whole cloth.
Okay.
Just most of them don't do anything for me. But
but
there are those that I love.
Okay. Well, what about this one?
Near Tokyo is going to change soon. The key to solving the riddle of Akira's growth pattern process.
I don't know who that is. What the hell's going on?
I mean, they just blast that kid right there with a smoke grenade. And just kind of like, we're seeing this kind of stuff again. Like this whole movie.
Yes, what's going on in Hong Kong right now.
No, exactly. That's the thing. Like we are seeing protests very similar to this, like in our own society. They just shot that cop in the goddamn face. And the movie is not only a commentary on, political activism, but it's also, I think, a commentary on youth and youth culture and how, because they've become so disaffected from society over time that they've formed their own gangs.
Sure.
From a police force that has become incredibly fascist. And Japan, they obviously have had a tumultuous history for years. I mean, they were one of the few countries, unlike, Korea or China, who weren't, under the throes of European imperial powers. They were just very isolated, and see how they've, managed to experience different things where it's like, they had, protests and things like that because when they eventually became very westernized. And so it's interesting to see, like, with this particular film, how they've been managing to incorporate that, but then it still feels very Japanese, but also very relevant to our own society.
Batman the Animated Series would pay homage to this all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess. So many people have paid homage to that. The motorcycle.
The motorcycle.
And
the may have been the second episode of Robin's Reckoning, and he's on the bike.
Oh,
and he
yeah,
does
yeah,
that
yeah.
exact same slide on the bike, and you're like, I see what you
I see what you did there. No, that's awesome. This guy's had a movie coming out, or just came out, to not such critical acclaim, but I think it's still very relevant, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man.
Oh, right.
And this movie, for people who might be kind of unfamiliar with it, this was a total critique on just reality television and game shows and things. Even before, like, definitely game shows. Obviously, before, like, this was kind of before, like, the idea of just doing reality television. Really wasn't until like something like the Truman Show, which caught on to
introduced the concept, and it was like, wow, what a scary future that would be if television really did shit like that. And then 2 or 3 years later, it was everywhere.
People are like, you know what? This movie's got a good idea. Let's go ahead and capitalize on it. And then we got, what we got.
Yeah,
Jersey Shore.
We live in the worst timeline.
Yeah. But I always thought that was interesting. I'm actually going to take a look at the trailer. I actually stopped watching. I'm like, okay, I think there's a reason why this movie is, it tackles some interesting elements, but it's not a great film.
I never.
Never seen it?
I never sat through it all.
Oh.
I was a big fan of the book, or rather it was part of it was a Stephen King book.
Yeah.
And it was I guess a novella where it was 4 different stories.
It was,
and all of them got made into movies. And Running Man was one of my favorites. Did not have this whole wrestling theme in it.
No, it did not.
It was a very serious story.
On your mark! I'll be back.
Go! All right. I think
He didn't even say it with any kind of enthusiasm.
He said it in the exact same way that Linda Hamilton said it in that new trailer, or the new Terminator movie. Yeah, so
I'll be back. Come on, man. Can we get another take on that?
Yeah, it's like, no, you only get one. Schwarzenegger's like,
oh, that's probably the 13th take. We're probably all the same. It's like, I give up.
Yeah, at this point. But I don't know. Again, maybe not the best film of all time, but again, the themes that was playing with it was ahead of its time. Talking about reality television, which I do appreciate about it. Not so much the film itself. Now, there is one last movie that I want to get into, and this one does not take place in 2019, unlike all these other ones, but I think it is very relevant, because I think it's dealing with something, again, that you'd figure by now we would already have solved, and it's probably like one of my favorite movies of all time, and might be yours, certainly by one of our favorite directors, which is Escape from New York.
Ah, yes.
And kind of like this and Halloween really put John Carpenter on the map, at least commercially. Like those were the 2 movies that I think made the most money for him.
Did they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, like I think he did this one right after Halloween.
Okay.
And then which was a huge success because it was so relatively low budget. Then he did this one, which is a huge hit, and then he did The Thing, which, even despite that movie being amazing, it commercially flopped because it went up against E.T. next year, or of that year. But what I've always liked about Escape from New York is that, again, dystopian society and dealing with fascism, but it was also one of the early films that was dealing with the idea of private prisons and
that's right.
privately owned prisons. And I always found that particularly very interesting. You had a movie that was the whole idea of it was like the police force has been nationalized, and like their big decision that they wanted to do was to create a whole supermax prison. Yeah. And where the point of it is just sending all of the worst criminals of the worst criminals, even people that the worst criminals, but also people that were just like for minor infractions, sent into this goddamn post-apocalyptic environment where you had like a cab driver, someone that stole something, or petty crimes, but they just want to put as many bodies in there as possible because they make a profit for it. And that was one of the things that I was like, wow, this is interesting that this movie tackles it, and how even to this day it is still something that has not been solved. And where you have people fighting against that kind of thing, and where it's finally being outlawed in some places. Like I know in California, I think you can no longer have privatized prisons.
Really?
I think that's one of the big things right now.
Because I figure it's one of those things where, yeah, they know it's wrong, but it makes too much money and they won't stop.
Yeah. Well, in the majority, I think in many states, they're still going to like have these privatized prisons. But I think California was like one of the first ones that.
California's always the first.
Yeah. I guess, for a lot of cases. But yeah, that's what I just kind of appreciate about a lot of these films is that, they're set in 2019, but they're still dealing with stuff that we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
And that's been, to me, just very, very interesting. And how, yes, as exaggerated as they are, I mean, you have, Kurt Russell fighting against a big, hairy wrestler man with a giant mustache. But it's the things that it's tackling that kind of make it relevant, and I think have the appeal that it has had.
Just watch those clips. It's got me. I want to see this movie again.
Yeah, it's so good. Time. That's kind of the thing, man. I've always been a huge John Carpenter fan for years. I mean, 2 of his movies are in like my top 10 of all time. The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China, which again was way ahead of its time. I think honestly, his films were just not as big commercial successes as someone like a Steven Spielberg type, which I think you could instantly make that comparison with him.
Well, because everything he did wasn't for the wide commercial audience.
Sure.
It was for, hey, I'm making something that he thought was cool, and if you got it, then you loved it.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you might be like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Although, man, The Thing is just a masterpiece.
There is one other movie, and I forgot to bring it up, but I have the clip ready for it. And it is dealing with, certainly a hot topic issue right now. It's been for decades, but it's the idea of climate change and how we're not taking care of our planet, which also is set in a post-apocalyptic 2019, which is the Road with Viggo Mortensen.
You brought this one in there because this one is the most likely.
Yeah, it kind of is, right? And that's the thing that I always thought was really funny.
Like they might have jumped the gun by a few years, but otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, but like in 10 years, wouldn't be surprised something like that could happen. But I did want to play a little bit of the trailer and just kind of get people. For people who don't know, if you haven't seen the film or even read Cormac McCarthy's original novel, which is fantastic, and where in that book they don't really specifically say what was the inciting incident that caused the apocalypse. It's like it could have been anything. It could have been war, it could have been environment. Like even the boy and son, who are played by Viggo Mortensen, and I forget the kid's name. The actor's name who played his son, but they just don't know what happened. Yeah. But it's kind of to show. I think the point of the book is, one, it's a survival story, but just to kind of show what would happen if our societies become so disaffected with its population. They don't care to fix the environment. Or to prevent, a nuclear holocaust or war, something like that. And these are real things. I mean, we have totalitarian regimes that their whole reason for existing is to just hold on to the nuclear weapons.
True.
And even like someone like Kim Jong Un, and it's like like these are still problems that we've been dealing with for not like half a century, and that's the thing that's kind of so scary about. And I think that the Road, which I love the book. But I think the movie does an even good job of just really kind of just showcasing.
This movie's so depressing.
It is very depressing. It is not a good. It is not a good.
You watch a movie and you put yourself in the place of the characters and you think, what would I do?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'd just kill myself.
Yeah, it would be pretty bad.
It's a treat for you.
It's bubbly.
And the fact that you have a kid who's just happy to have like a soda, that was one of the big scenes that really affected me when I first saw it. It's like, wow, that's kind of incredible. But yeah, those are just kind of some of the movies I just wanted to bring up and touch on.
That's a good list.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I hope people enjoy it.
I'm sad we went out on the road.
Yeah.
All the other ones are like, these things are happening, but they're kind of far off, and this is the one where it's like, oh.
Yeah, well, perfect transition.
Well, the thing is, usually in society, when there's a disaster, people come together and help each other out, which is not what happens with the road.
Not this one. People just like, I want to eat you.
But the way I see society going now, and I could see it being more like that, where it's very much a every man for himself.
I mean, we always say that, we're living in the darkest time or whatever.
But everyone has said that.
Everyone absolutely has said that. I do think, at least maybe in the last few years, because we certainly have become more tribal. The idea of with our our political affiliations.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a huge issue where it's just that never-ending tension and outrage. And like a lot of these movies that we've even talked about have kind of dealt with that. Maybe not specifically with politics, but certain with the class system and things.
Sure.
And or lack of employment, or equal rights. Again, it's like everything that we have in our own society. Like you can see in all those other films, which is why they kind of stand the test of time.
It's true. It's one of these things where I feel like the internet, it certainly has connected us more with each other, but it's also connecting us where we now seeing the darker side of people where we didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And maybe there has to come a point where we get used to that. Because right now it's still shocking.
Yeah.
Somebody can post something and everything is shock and outrage. But maybe there will come a point where it'll just get woven into the fabric of how we think of people and go, yeah, that's just how it is.
I can definitely see that, but then my one concern with that is just we become, because look, we might become numb to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And where it's like when things that we should be passionate about or should try to deal with, that will kind of be pushed aside, ignored. It's like, oh, that's just the way it is. Like that, I think, is the risk, and that's why it can lead to like some of these dystopian societies that we're talking about in all these films, these future 2019s.
Yeah, no, that's a pack of cannibals over there. Yeah, I know. That's their thing. That I don't judge.
Not even me right now. So I'm sorry for that one guy.